All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Philip. I work for Anaconda as a consultant, but on the side work on various open source projects, of which Panel is one. It's a project I started about a year ago, learning from some of the experience I've had consulting for various clients to solve issues I've seen over and over again in various data science workflows. So who of you has a Jupyter dashboard with a plot in it? Okay, that's good. Or a table, an image, an equation, whatever. Well, it's to you. I thought so. And maybe you might want to explore these things or share them with people. Is that a common need? I would think so. So, Panel is for you then. So, Panel, as I said, is a pretty new library. It's built on Bokeh, which is generally thought of as a plotting library, but there's actually a lot more behind Bokeh. And Panel basically lets your notebooks double as apps or dashboards. So you can use just about any plotting library, image type, or other objects and embed it in a panel. So the comparison, I mean, we just had that excellent talk about Dash. The comparison to Dash obviously becomes pretty obvious, so I might as well address it right away. What we try to do is we try to kind of address, meet people closer to where they are already. So they already have a notebook, they have some analysis in their notebook, and they want to kind of create a little dashboard or app that they want to share with people, and then revise and kind of adjust things in the dashboard, in the notebook, and then revise, repeat, and kind of build a dashboard that way. So while it's, we've geared it towards usage in Jupyter Notebooks, it's not actually, it doesn't require Jupyter Notebooks. You can just write a Python script and deploy that, just like you could with a Bokeh app. So before I go through like the typical workflow that you have with with Panel usually, I'm going to quickly take you through some demos of the kind of things you can achieve with Panel. Okay, so on the Panel website, we have a nice little gallery of some more sophisticated examples. We're actively building this out. So I announced Panel about 6 months ago, and we're actively working on kind of improving the examples. There's examples of simple apps, and then the usages of the various APIs that Panel provides, how to build dynamic UIs, and so on. So that's quite nice. And one thing you need to know about Panel is basically it consists of 3 different types of objects. The first are panes. Basically, the panes provide a view onto some object. You've got some plot, some Bokeh plot, Plotly plot, Vega plot, whatever. You put it in a panel, in a pane, and that visualizes it inside Panel. Then there's the layouts. Currently, there's columns, rows, tabs, widget boxes, and so on. And then there's the widgets, which give you the interactivity you might want. So there's a whole range. And we're actively expanding these. Okay. Then we have a website of various examples on examples.pybiz.org. So these are more involved examples that kind of take some subject matter and go through them. And then I'm briefly going to take you through some examples. So this is a Panel app. We're running on Bokeh server, where I have a few demos lined up. So the first demo I'm going to show you is this Gapminder demo. So here we've embedded 4 different plots from different libraries. Here, first one is generated using HVplot as a Bokeh plot. Interactive, we've embedded an Altair Vega plot, a Matplotlib plot, and a Plotly plot, and we've linked it to this widget. So if I drag this, all the 4 different plots update. And so whatever plotting library you use, one of the common ones in Python, Panel will just support your current needs. Meet you where you are, basically. Another nice demo we've built is this cross-filtering demo. This is basically all the world's glaciers. This plot is generated using Datashader. So it's several 100,000 data points, but Datashader will scale to millions. And basically allows you to cross-filter on these. So the nice thing this demonstrates is you can embed your plots in here. They can be linked, so you can have interactions on the plots themselves, either using Bokeh or Plotly. You can have updating text, and you can have buttons, and so on. So the other nice thing is because this is all built on top of Bokeh, which has a really nice layout engine, you can see that when I drag this, these plots are responsive, and everything updates as I drag it around. So the next demo I'm going to show you is a portfolio optimizer. Basically, the idea here is that you have a stock data set, you have various stocks, you can upload a little file, But the thing that this is meant to demonstrate is, again, you can have plots, you can have buttons, you can upload things, but also you can have tabs. For example, if you can't fit something on a page, it'll let you lay things out in this way. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to show you a more involved demo, which is this dashboard we built, or someone else built for the LSST. This is the largest telescope in the world. It's currently being built. So they want to analyze quite a lot of data. They have billions of stars, obviously, that they're scanning for. And so this is a bit more involved app. It uses something called templates, which I'll show you later. But basically, this allows you to do more complex things. So here we're cross-filtering on a couple million points. And so when I drag this, you'll see the other plots update in response. You can do quite complex things. So this is not the standard thing, laying things out with rows and columns, but rather we're actually embedding things in a template. And I'll show you how that works in a bit. Okay, so going from there, I'm going to take you through the standard workflow that you have at Panel. So we're going to start with a data set, as you so often do. So here, this data set, I don't know how well you can see this. I might increase the size a little bit. So this data set is basically just a common data set of room occupancy. It's basically measurements in a room as people go in and out of this room, measurements like temperature, humidity, light, CO2. It's just an example. It's just trying to show you what the workflow might be. So what we've already done is we've already got a notebook. We've already done some analysis, right? So we've got a plotting function. We've got some little analysis. So what this is doesn't really matter, but I'll quickly take you through it. So we've taken the rolling mean of this over time, then computed a residual. And then we're trying to find outliers by basically taking points that are away from this rolling mean by a certain number of standard deviations. And so we've already got this. We've got this function. Ooh, well, live demos. I need to actually run this. So we got a matplotlib plot. Easy enough. Everyone's familiar. But now you need to share this with your boss, or your boss's boss, who doesn't know that code. He doesn't want to go and manually edit this rolling window or pick a different variable or whatever. So you might want to explore this in a nicer way. So as a starting point, you can simply say pn.interact, give it this function, and it creates some widgets for you. If you're familiar with IPy widgets, this is basically the same thing. It kind of inspects the function. It's pretty magic. And it gives you a GUI. Fine. It's a good start. Interact is being as magic as it is, kind of doesn't know that a window can't be negative, really. Or that sigmas, you shouldn't use a negative sigma on this data set. Doesn't really make sense. So what we're going to do is actually give it some additional information. We're going to tell it basically the window size should be between 1 and 60. We're going to tell it the various variables that we have in this data set, the range of the sigma values, and then we're going to run it again. Cool. Bit more useful. We can now pick the different variables. These are now in a sensible range, and we've got a GUI, right? We could share this with our boss, which is fine. So we're going to do that. We're going to see what that looks like. So if you run the .show command on this object, what you get is a separate server, a Bokeh server that is started up, and you can see what this app looks like. So within just 2 lines of code, we've now generated this little app, which is interactive and kind of does something that we want it. But it's not very pretty, right? And our boss doesn't really understand what a sigma value is. So we're going to add a little bit of text. But before that, we're going to inspect what this actual object is, right? We've run this interact thing and we've gotten something back and it visualized itself and it all seems rather magic. But what this actually is, if you print it, is a column which contains another column. And in this column are the widgets. And then in this, there's a row in it as well, which contains the matplotlib plot that we were showing, right? And then you can also see here that we've got these nice little indexes which tell us how to index into this object. So we can unpack what we've gotten from this interact thing and then build something that's actually kind of nicer. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to add some text, define some markdown text, unpack our little interact object, get the first column, the row containing the plots, and then put that next to the text with 2 of the widgets because, again, our boss doesn't understand what a sigma is. So we're going to just ignore that and just use 2 of the variables, right? So now we've got something that's a bit nicer, a bit prettier, we can actually show this to someone, right? So that's a good start. And we can now, again, use show to show this little app and share it with someone. What we can also do is as I said, we've dropped this extra widget, but actually because things are linked, you can have things linked across cells. So maybe do something else here. So things stay linked across cells. And also note that because everything is linked as well, you can also just change the variable from Python. So programmatically, we can still alter the widgets and things update. Okay. So far we've done everything with interact. As I said, it's kind of a magic thing. It does some crazy stuff inside. It does this introspection and things. And maybe you want to be more explicit, right? You want to declare some widgets that you've declared yourself. So here what we're going to do is declare a variable widget, which is basically a radio button group. We'll see what that looks like in a minute. An int slider. And then this is fairly similar to what you saw with Dash in the last talk. Basically, you create a reactive function where you say, actually, this function depends on these two widgets. So whenever these widgets change, I want this function to be re-executed and my plot to update. So that's what we've done here. We've got this reactive function. And then we can just put this reactive function in our layout. And panel will know to inspect the decorated thing and find out what it should listen to. And so if we do that, we again get... I need to remember to run these things. We again get our little app, and this time we've got a nice different widget and so on. Okay, so throughout this entire workflow, we've used matplotlib, which is nice and fine, but maybe we want to use something else. Maybe we just want to swap out for a different library. So what we're going to use here is hvplot. hvplot is basically a drop-in replacement for the pandas.plot function. But it also works on X-arrays, dash data frames, intake, geopandas. So it's a really neat thing that we've been building as well, which you can check out. So what we've done is simply we're going to swap the plotting function we had before out for one that uses hvplot to plot this mean and average. And now we get an app that's now interactive. We've got a little interactive bokeh plot here. We can zoom and pan and do all the nice things like inspect the individual data points and so on. So whatever plotting library you use, you can just drop it in, and it'll just display it. Okay, so this was just an example of an example workflow that you might have. You probably already have a bunch of notebooks with some output, some plots, some tables in them. You can just drop those in there. But once you've actually, so we've seen the .show part, like how do I basically stand up the server really quick to look at what it would look like as a standalone app. But now I want to run it and deploy it somewhere, right? So what you can do is you can simply, instead of adding .show at the end of your little object, you can say .servable. And what that means is then that particular object will get picked up when you execute this thing. So when I run panel.serve on this notebook now, again, I'll get the fully deployed app running in a fairly scalable way. So what this shows is that panel basically can take you through your entire data analysis workflow. You can start by just using your standard tools, then drop them into a panel, add some widgets, some interactivity to your thing, and finally you can deploy it to be shared within your organization, or in some cases even outside of it. Okay, so I'm going to show you some other features that kind of make panel quite nice and stand apart from some other tools. So one thing you can do, what we've seen so far is everything we needed calls back into Python. Every time you change a widget, it has to go back to Python, just like you saw in the Dash talk. Ask it what is the updates that I need to apply, and so on, which is fine if you want to deploy a dashboard. But if you've got a simple little app, that doesn't seem that important, right? You don't really want to stand up a whole web server just to do that, and it's just a simple app, and it's got like 10 different states or whatever. So what we're going to do is say, actually, I want to embed the output in here. So what is this doing now is we can actually see what it's doing. So you can see here, it's actually going through the different states of these different widgets, recording what the state at every stage is, and then embedding that output into either the notebook, or you can have a standalone HTML file where all this output is saved into, or even have it export to JSON so that every time you change a widget, it fetches that update from the JSON file to update it. So you don't need to actually have a full server. You can simply say embed, and then you don't need the web server with it. So I'm going to have to let this finish. So if you want to, instead, you can also say save this. So currently, this would get embedded into this notebook itself. What you can also do is say, actually, I want to save this into a separate file, and then I want to embed this as well. So this should be just about finished now. We're going to let it go through the final little states. Okay, so it's now, yes. So now, obviously, if you have a million different states, that's not a sensible thing to do. In this case, what it's done is basically sampled the parameter space in a fairly discrete way. You can also tell it to sample it a bit more, and so on. So embedding is a quite nice thing for a simple app that you just want to share as an HTML file. So another nice feature is templating. So you saw an example of that earlier, but I'll briefly take you through how that actually works. So far we've built all our, in our example workflow, we've built everything using rows and columns. But actually, if you want to have a nice little template around it, make it look a bit more pretty, you might want to drop it into an actual HTML template. So in this case, what we've done is if you used Materialize, which is basically an implementation of the Material UI, style, and then the way this works is it's a Ginger template, so you extend it a little bit, you extend the basic template, then you can say, you can either say basically just iterate over all the plots or panels that I've added to this template, or you can explicitly give it names. So you can say here, at this place, insert the Vega plot, at this place, insert the Plotly plot, or whatever you have. So in this case, we've done that. We've declared a number of plots, a Vega plot, a Plotly plot, a Holovy's plot. We can then say, so this currently doesn't render in the notebook yet, but we can launch it as a separate server. So here we now have a nicer looking UI on top of things. We have our Vega plot in there. We've got our Plotly plot in there. Nice little 3D plot. And then we've got a nice little Holovy's app built on Bokeh, which allows you to basically interactively zoom and pan and kind of explore really quite large data sets, and filter and change the color map and so on. So let me go back. Okay, so these are some of the features that Panel will support. Going forward, so obviously Panel is still a pretty young project. We're still actively building out our documentation. We want to have detailed guides on how to actually deploy this thing on different cloud services. So if you want to help with that, join us at the sprints on the weekend. We're going to build some more examples and expand the gallery. And another nice thing that we want to do is kind of add more components. And part of that work is we're actually, we've been engaging with some of the Jupyter folks to kind of support Jupyter widgets bidirectionally, which means the Jupyter widgets ecosystem is fairly large. They've built a lot of nice components, and it would be nice if we could reuse those, right? So the idea is that not only are you going to be able to put your Panel app inside an NumPy widget and then deploy it using some of their solutions for dashboard deployment, but you're also going to be able to put Jupyter widgets inside Panel to kind of reuse that ecosystem. So that's something we want to do. And finally, I want to compare a little bit. So we just had a talk on Dash. There's also the Jupyter folks have been building something called Voila, which also makes it easy to kind of deploy your dashboards, your notebooks as a dashboard. But before I do that comparison, I just want to say how really great it is to see that the Python ecosystem finally has these solutions, right? Ours has had Shiny for years and years and years. And finally, we're seeing these solutions emerge in the Python ecosystem. So while I'm going to be doing some comparisons, I definitely do not want to denigrate the other libraries. Dash is super nice to build probably more complex apps than Panel will let you do. Voila makes it super easy to just say, Voila, serve my notebook. You don't need to do any extra notation and so on. But there are some differences, right? So compared to Dash, you saw Dash is kind of closely tied to the kind of structure you see in a HTML DOM tree. So it's pretty closely tied to HTML concepts. I think Panel is a bit more Pythonic and more concise in some ways. And also Panel lets you use a variety of plotting libraries just out of the box. And you can also embed Panel things inline in a notebook, so if you don't actually want to deploy this thing, you can do some stuff just in a notebook, right? So it's kind of more geared towards this full life cycle of a data analysis workflow where you start in a notebook and then you kind of explore a bit, and then finally you might deploy this thing, right? And then I also wanted to compare it to Voila. Voila is also a really nice library. They've been doing a lot of work to make it work well. Voila is tied to the Jupyter ecosystem. So which means that basically it just runs the Jupyter server. It starts a kernel for each user or each session that's started. So unlike that, Panel will start a separate Bokeh server, which means it doesn't necessarily have that overhead of starting a kernel for each user, which can be somewhat significant. And it also means Panel will let you share data, across different users, right? You've got some computation, you've got some data that's expensive to load, uses a lot of memory. You can share that and then reuse it. And then finally, the final difference is Voila usually just serves all the output in your notebook. So if you want to kind of narrow down what you want to serve, you write a template. In Panel, so both have trade-offs, but in Panel, you basically designate, this is my output, this is what I want to actually serve in the end. Okay, so thanks everyone. You can Panel and HVplot, which I've shown today, are just some of the libraries that we work on. We also work on libraries like Datashader, which did the nice resampling that you saw earlier. HoloViews, GeoViews, Param, color sets, so check those out. Go visit us at holoviz.org. It provides a nice tutorial taking you through these tools. You can find me on Twitter and GitHub under PhilipJFR, and this is my email.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Philip.
everyone.
Yes. Does anyone have questions? Any questions?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the great talk. If you're using the save option, saving the HTML file, and using embed equals true, what's like a practical limit for how large of a data set you could embed?
That is a pretty good question. So I haven't scaled it up, so 1,000 different states is sensible, right? It's not too crazy. Especially if you can then spill that out to some JSON files, so you can just dump those somewhere on a web server or something. But it certainly won't scale to, like, if you want to have 5 widgets, which each have 100 different states. I mean, that's the combinatorial explosion, and it's crazy, right? So it's really geared to smaller. You just want a one-off thing that you want to send to someone.
Hi. You mentioned some new features that you want to implement. Could you give some examples of what you see happening in the future?
Sure. So one of the things we really want to push on is the IPyWidgets integration, but then different components. So some of the components I want in editable tables. Some other things I can imagine. We definitely want to push the templating a bit further. So I'm currently working on, for example, being able to show the templates inside a notebook so you can kind of see what it's going to look like and then deploy it. But beyond that, it's really driven by users. So we've had various users contribute new components, things like a VTK renderer, any new plotting libraries that you want to embed. So it's really driven by users' needs, I think.
Thank you again for this great talk. This is definitely a tool I want to try out. One question would be, if I want to use this in a sort of semi-production environment, just show it to some customer or something on the web, is there a simple way of implementing some basic authentication with this?
Yes. So this is something that's, well, right now, no, but in about 2 weeks, Bokeh, so since it's built on top of Bokeh, we get all the nice features that the Bokeh team implements for free, and they've just implemented an auth provider. So you can simply basically write a little Tornado auth provider, and then you get it for free. So we're going to have examples on that very, very soon. In the next couple of weeks, I hope.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Philipp. It was amazing presentation. So let's give an applause to our speaker once more and have a nice lunch, guys and girls.